1 year ago, many of us sat in front of this screen, about to embark into the world of Solaris for the very first time. What we didn't know is that this choice would be a key factor in understanding what the story of Wuthering Waves is actually about. To show you how and why this decision is so important will be the goal of today's video. Many of you certainly have noticed by now that there are a few characters in the game that share similar features and designs. One prominent example in Anko and Tauji I have already shown you during the last video. It's not just that they are both pink-haired characters, their entire color palette is basically identical, with the exception of a slightly darker pink tone on Tauji. Taking a closer look at how those two are dressed themselves, we find even more similarities. Especially the grey patterns on the skirt parts of their clothing. I'm currently not sure why the designers made this choice when making Tauji and Anko, as there is no further connection between the two, but maybe we will find more if we examine other examples for this phenomenon. Moving on to our silver-haired duo, we are beginning to see a bit more of a difference in color schemes. Looking past those differences, we notice the same draping cloth and belt combination. Has to be said though that they share this choice of fashion with Gian, which honestly makes sense as he picked the outfit for Calcharo. However, this time the similarities go noticeably past the visual parts. But first let's bring back Anko for a second opinion. You see, Anko has this interesting quirk where she categorizes people into animals they represent. The same way she describes us as a cat, we can ask her about thoughts on those two.
Wanna hear a secret? That strange big guy Alto's been working with is actually a doggy person. That's why he's a big doggy in Uncle's stories.
Not really a surprise for our dog of war. But what does Alto end up being? Alto looked like a big dog, or maybe a wolf, an affable grey wolf that wouldn't bare its fangs at her. See? Even Anko thinks they are similar. After all, both have aligning philosophies when it comes to accepting clients and determining prices for their work. If you want, you can even interpret a common theme into the single coin mentioned in both characters' backstories. Taking a look at how Calcharo even builds his own little intelligence network, you can imagine that he could very much have ended up in the same field of work as Alto, if he grew up without the constant fight for survival. So once again we ask ourselves, is this uncanny resemblance really just a coincidence, or is there more to it? 2 points make a line after all. Let's keep going. So far we've looked at Anko and Alto and compared them to their respective counterparts. Since both are members of the Black Shores, it would only make sense for our next target to be Camellia. But is there even a corresponding counterpart to her? Well, Verena would be a somewhat obvious choice. I know, both having something to do with plants isn't the best argument when they look so vastly different, so let me make it easier on you. Going back to the hidden audio log from last video, we noticed some interesting deviations on how Lady Flora is described. First off, she's described as Rover's little tail, focus being on the word little. Despite what we discussed last time about Camellia's age, we can now at least assume that Lady Flora is indeed capable of aging. But the more interesting detail are the vibrant colors of Lady Flora's flowers, which doesn't add up at all with any of the designs we saw for her. So, are Camellia and Lady Flora different people after all? No, she just spent too much time on the shores. You see, there's an in-universe reason for the shores' monotone colors, given to us by, ironically, a crew robot by the name of Q Flora. Q. Plants that grow on testitite will slowly lose their pigmentation until they turn purple or white. It's not hard to imagine that process applying to plant-based resonators as well. With this picture of a younger and more colorful Camellia in mind, do you see why I consider them connected? Suddenly, you notice more and more common traits. The twin tails, a single flower placed on the upper torso, even Camellia's black strands emulate Verena's headband. Not to mention that having two characters with resonance abilities so close to each other is in fact a big deal in a game without a plant-based element. At this point we can no longer ignore the feeling that something weird is going on in the background. So how can we explain those doubles? Once again, I want to shift our focus to our poor coping child Encore. During the 1.4 event quest, Rover has to navigate through different dreams, most of them nightmares filled with very real worries and concerns the characters have. Only Encore's dream seems happy, like a fun adventure story. If you played her character quest, you know that's exactly how she copes with reality, so we will have to take a very close look at what this dream is actually trying to tell us. Suddenly, the following two lines from Cosmos make a lot more sense.
I used to live in the magical kingdom, but I went on a big adventure far away. When I came back, no one knew me, and they wouldn't play with me.
What an interesting concept to just throw in here. With those two sentences, it should be clear that Encore is not originally from this world, and the same applies to the other two Blackshore members. It can be no coincidence that Alto seems very familiar with the very person I connected to time powers. By the way, if you want further evidence that I'm right about her being the one responsible for our time travel, besides what I already showed during part 1 of my lore series, even Sydney Ma calls her Mother Time, based on her inspiration from mythology. So yes, Alto really is just Kalcharo from a different timeline, where he wasn't forced into being part of the gang fights. At least I'm very confident that's the case. As for Camellia, her entire backstory reads like an endless time loop of arriving at Petalfall Village, following Rover to the Black Shores, and going different ways again. So I'll leave it to your imagination how she fits into this pattern. Speaking of which, isn't there another Black Shores member from a different timeline that could have a counterpart in this world? And so we find ourselves here again. So, which path will you choose? Choose female Rover and you will have a hard time finding someone with similar features. Choose male Rover, however. You see, there's a good reason they dangle those tail-like appendages in front of your eyes for the entire early game. And it's precisely for this moment. I've zero shame in admitting that seeing a character's backside was the precise moment I fell in love with the game's story. Because suddenly we find ourselves in the predicament of seeing an alternative version of our main character in an antagonistic position. So let's go over why Geshu-Lin and Rover are, without the shadow of a doubt, the same person. Same eyes? Check. Same face shape? Check. Same hair shape? Check. Same symmetrical earpins? Check. Same bandaged left hand? Check. Plus the aforementioned dangly bits. As for Geshu-Lin's right arm, well, we can't really tell if under that glove hides another tesseract mark, but it very much seems like Geshu-Lin channeled some form of transformation through that arm. But wait, if Rover is Geshu-Lin and Geshu-Lin is Scar, doesn't that mean...
Should the day come when you find yourself in a similar predicament to mine, I'd need to defy your wishes, ignore your pleas, defeat you, and be your savior.
I was never the shepherd, never will be. You and I, we are the Black Lamb, the one who breaks the rules.
Singular, by the way. But let's assume for a moment that the connection we drew between Scar and Geshu-Lin is wrong. Can we still find a connection between Rover and our lovable Black Lamb? The cables or whatever on Scar's back could emulate Rover's tails, and we still have the symmetrical earrings, but what troubles us the most are the eyes. Luckily, we can easily explain those. Doesn't this combination of red and blue remind you of someone? I think it's not far-fetched to assume this to be the outcome of Rover and Abby fusing completely. After all, that's kind of our whole deal, and Abby already lives inside of us. Short intermission. After writing this part of the script, I noticed something very important. Geshu-Lin has been depicted by stories to have a single red eye when transformed, specifically the right one. I refuse to believe this is a coincidence, especially since we have another precedent with the whole blue left eye thing. Now back to the regular program. So, have we now proven that male Rover is the canonical version? That's how it seems. Unless...
Unless I'm not the only overseer in Jinzhou, right?
Now that we have connected male Rover to Scar, the next logical step would be to compare a female Rover to Frolova. And voila, they look more similar than one would expect at first glance. Let's go down the list again. Same death stare? Check. Same face shape? Check. Same general hair shape? Check. Single ornament on the left ear? Check. Same bandaged left hand? Once again, check. Same whatever's going on here? Yes sir. As for the eyes, you can imagine my excitement when they cut her bandage at the end of 2.0. I've seen the eye of the enemy, and it was red. So yes, same epic fusion argument here. But fusion with who? We are still missing our female counterpart to the role Geshe-Lin plays in all of this. Don't worry, I got you. Or most of the lore community to be precise, as it's nothing new that Frolova is most likely the girl the whole Chichi village incident revolved around. This place again. Considering she vanished during that incident, we can assume she already joined the Exodus at that point. So I wouldn't expect us to get a proper look at her like we did with Geshe-Lin. And there you have it. Both Rovers are equally canon. We just got to see more of the male version. I'll go over the specifics in their respective timelines at a later point. I could honestly just end the video here as I achieved what I wanted to convey, but that would be boring, so let's keep the train rolling. We still have more than enough pairs to compare to each other. Crownless and Dreamless for example. What exactly is the deal with those two? One little detail I find interesting is that our current Crownless is the only Overlord class TD that is specifically mentioned to be a clone. Where's the original? I see two explanations here. One, the original evolved into what we can see Geshe-Lin fighting against during the war beneath the Crescent, and is sending this clone as a minion. The stone remains of that battle share the Crownless's form after all. Two, we know at least one of the past Rovers defeated the first version of Crownless. Maybe they absorbed the original and only left behind an empty copy. Which Rover? Well, I mentioned Geshe-Lin channeled some sort of transformation through his arm. If we take a closer look at the depiction of said arm, it looks very familiar, doesn't it? Not to mention that Scar and Geshe-Lin aren't the only ones with this kind of purple flames. Crownless uses something similar as well. Hang on, why are we doing this again? Next I'm going to connect Dreamless to Frolova, just wait for it. Did you know Dreamless is just a puppet whose strings are being pulled by someone else? Did you know Hecate was the goddess of many things such as the moon, ghosts, and necromancy? Speaking of necromancy, didn't we hear something about raising the dead before? That's right, not only did we connect Crownless to Geshe-Lin, we went full circle and connected Dreamless to the Chichi village girl. But how does that make sense? Geshe-Lin could have absorbed the Crownless, sure, but that doesn't work for the little girl who seemingly always had this power. Obviously, I have a theory explaining this discrepancy, but we will have to go back a few steps. And with that, I mean to the very beginning. Huh? What are you doing here? That's a weirdly shaped rock. Is that an arm? You've heard me talk about the importance of rocks in the context of Renaudians enough, but are you telling me the beginning of the game is directly connected to the remains of Overthrax, and therefore the Dream and Crownless? Maybe I was right after all with my theory about what we know as Tacit Discords, being what became of resonators from the previous world/loop, and Rover was extracted from those remains. Time is a closed loop after all. Would that mean TDs are something like the spirits of the dead? By the way, did I mention necromancy being an existing feat? Obviously, if there was a resonator that became dreamless in the previous loop, there would be someone with similar powers in this one too. And this resonator would be the Chichi village girl. Oh, While we're here, our mother time looks way too much like a Yang Yang. Face, hair, clothes, you know the whole spiel by now. Ever wondered why Yang Yang is the mascot of Wuthering Waves and not Abby? Just saying, she will be there for the entire game after all. From the beginning prologue to the final epilogue. Okay, we seriously need to stop or we will become paranoid and question everything. But wait, I have one more. Don't worry, it's not a whole tangent, just a small addendum to the crownless/dreamless mess. You see, as one would expect, Abby is also somehow involved. I think Kuro misunderstood the concept of April Fools. And with that, I'll leave you to processing all of this. Even my brain needs a break after this. I will be honest, the previous 3 videos were never meant to be independent theories. They are mostly preparations for the big hits and gave me time to get used to the whole content creation thing. So I'm really glad we finally made it this far. As I mentioned, I have had this one cooking since I saw Gasolin back in 1.0, and it's basically why I made this channel. One milestone ticked off the list. As for what's next, I guess we'll have to wait and see what else I want to talk about. Either way, I'm far from done, and once the channel properly takes off, you can look forward to lore crafting streams and community collabs, because I really want to turn this from me talking to myself into an open dialogue. Until then, I would love to see your guesses about what the fox is cooking. See ya!